not far behind, though the Unitarian denomination didn't get organized until 1825. Most of the congregational churches in Boston were in Unitarian hands by the turn of the century, and as early as 1800, Unitarians were celebrating Christmas. In 1817, both denominations began a big push in Boston to have the day celebrated with church services and to close down businesses. The push was only partly successful. Talk about Charles Follen. Charles Follen was a German radical who landed in Boston in 1825, began the teaching of German and gymnastics at Harvard. He married a Catholic, got friendly with William Ellery Channing, and started studying for the Unitarian minister, but what he's mostly remembered for is introducing the German custom of using a tree to celebrate Christmas. In 1832, with a new baby son, Follen went out to the woods and cut a tree and decorated it with small toys and dolls and actual live candles. An English visitor, Harriet Martineau, gave this account. This is 1832. It looked really beautiful. The room seemed in a blaze, and the ornaments were so well hung that no accident happened, except that one doll's petticoat caught fire. There was a sponge tied to the end of a stick to put out any supernumerary blaze, and no harm ensued. I mounted the steps behind the tree to see the effect of opening the doors. It was delightful. The children poured in, but in a moment, every voice was hushed. Their faces were upturned to the blaze, all eyes wide open, all lips parted, all steps arrested. If you've ever seen a tree decorated with live candles, it is truly a wonder to behold. You can imagine the impression it must have made on those children when no one had ever seen a Christmas tree before. While Follen was doing his best to bring some warmth to Puritan Massachusetts, a group of wealthy and conservative New Yorkers, known as the Knickerbockers, were changing the way the holiday was viewed. In the early 1820s, the president of the New York Historical Society, one John Pintard, started promoting the celebration of St. Nicholas Day, which is December 6th. St. Nicholas was the patron saint of New York. My daughter lives on St. Nicholas Street in Brooklyn. And the custom of visiting houses and giving gifts started then on St. Nicholas Day, December 6th. St. Nicholas in Europe had been a rather stern figure. He would reward the good kids, but he would punish the bad. He had a sidekick named Belsnickel, who was shown carrying a whip to get the errant children in shape. Together, they were much more concerned with the bad children than the good. While Pintard may have introduced the figure of St. Nicholas, it was Washington Irving, the linchpin of the Knickerbockers, who popularized it. Irving's book, The Knickerbocker Tales, mentions St. Nicholas 25 times, including a line where he lays his finger aside of his nose. But of course, that brings us to Clement Clark Moore, the actual originator of the feast, the visit from St. Nicholas in 1822. He was a conservative New York Episcopalian, and it has endured down through the ages as the definitive origin of the Santa Claus myth. The purpose of this, according to historian Stephen Nissenbaum, was to replace the riotous street celebrations of Christmas with their lower-class drunken revelry and loud Californian bands with a domestic celebration celebrated on the family, children, and gift exchange. Indeed, in a sense, childhood as we now understand it did not exist before this. Children were considered incomplete adults, and the idea was to get them through this terrible time as quickly as possible with a stern moral instruction for their souls and the ever-ready threat of punishment. The Knickerbockers were actually English, not Dutch descent, and Episcopalian in religion rather than Reformed. They were politically conservative. In a previous generation, they had been quietly sympathetic to the British. They were anti-Jefferson and felt themselves to belong to a patrician class under siege. In that light, says Nissenbaum, quote, their invention of Santa Claus was part of what we now see as a larger, ultimately quite serious cultural enterprise, forging a pseudo-Dutch identity for New York, a placid folk identity that could provide a cultural counterweight to the commercial bustle and democratic misrule of early 19th century New York, unquote. In 19th century Massachusetts, though, it was the liberals who celebrated a domestic Christmas. In Concord, congregational families adhered to the old Puritan custom, where Christmas was not observed, but in the Unitarian Thoreau household, gifts were exchanged. As late as 1856, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow could remark, "We're in a transition state about Christmas here in New England. The old Puritan feeling prevents it from being a cheerful, hearty holiday, though every year makes it more so." And the other piece the 19th century contributes to our modern Christmas is Dickens's A Christmas Carol. While Dickens was born and died an Anglican, he came to New England in the 1830s and palled around with Unitarians like Emerson and Longfellow, and on returning to England, became a regular fixture at the Unitarian Church in London. And it was at this time of his life that he wrote A Christmas Carol. The sentiments in this speech of Scrooge's nephews, which I quoted last year, are typical of Unitarian thought of the time. Quote, this is Scrooge's nephew speaking to Scrooge. "There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew, "Christmas among the rest. But I'm sure I've always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." So, New York Episcopalians created Santa and made the holiday domestic. But Unitarians 200 years ago showed that you could celebrate the holiday without embracing the Jesus of the Nicene Creed. What we celebrate, what we have always celebrated, is the ethos Jesus taught, not the sacrifice of the Son of God, not the Messiahship prophesied hundreds of years before. If the world is to be saved through Jesus, it will be through his life, not his birth or his death. It will be saved by actually living what he taught, by loving our enemies, by turning the other cheek, by embracing the worth and dignity of every person. The 19th century domesticated the holiday, made gift-giving a key part of it, and put children and Santa Claus in the center. This has not all been positive, as you may know. The great rise of commercialism, the dependence of many forms of retail business on Christmas purchases, the relentless rumpa-pum of the shopping mall, all have their origin in these developments. But there is a good side to it, too. By introducing a child-friendly, godlike figure of beneficence, a jolly old elf, our 19th century forebears put the wonder into this holiday. There's a spiritual theory that I've heard a lot throughout my life. I don't know who first told it to me. But it is that children are born open and connected to the world instinctively. And in the course of their education and the formation of their reasoning powers, they become more and more detached from this innate spiritual connection. As adults, we become completely alienated from the spirit, imprisoned in the fortress of words and logic and reason that we have built in our minds. We learn early on to seek reasons for things, to offer explanations. We are rewarded when we can explain things. So we live in the assumption that everything can be explained. Where's the place for wonder in that? For a child, everything is new. And a lot of it is scary, but there are also unexpected delights. Initially, Christmas is one of them. But as the child learns more, he or she begins to expect a certain magic in Christmas. And sure enough, the presents are there on Christmas morning. And the milk has been drunk and the cookie has been eaten. And as the child's logical mind grows, he or she begins to turn a skeptical eye on Santa Claus. But this creates a crisis of faith. If he or she stops believing in Santa Claus, will Santa Claus stop believing in him or her and pass the house by? The reason I think Christmas appeals to so many Unitarian Universalists is that most of us really do want a little wonder in our lives. Like Lawrence Ferlinghetti, we are awaiting a rebirth of wonder. We won't go back to believing in Santa Claus. Many of us won't go back to believing in God. But we want to catch something of the child's outlook on the world. Jesus once said that his followers needed to become like little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. Certain strains of Buddhism recommend that the seeker adopt the beginner's mind. Embracing what our 19th century forebears set up, we seek the spirit of the child at this time of year. Next week at this time, we will have actual children in this sanctuary. And I hope that you can all come and bring your friends and drink in their enthusiasm and wonder at the holidays that will be celebrated in song and dance. The great paradoxical symbol of Christmas is God, the most powerful force in the universe, the maker of all, as an infant, the most powerless and vulnerable creature. While we as rationalists can live with tidings of reason and fact, we can contemplate the notion of God as a child with wonder and maybe a little joy. God rescue Unitarians. Let us all at all our ages undergo a rebirth of wonder. It is never too late to take delight in the world around us. To close these reflections,